Okay, it's pouring today for whatever reason too. It seems like a lot of people were unprepared for the rain. People were just walking and playing t-shirts at times. What's going on? With that in mind, what's going on today? I guess in this area you might be seeing more drones around for search and rescue. How about this one? This one says, BC government clears drone use for search and rescue crews. As it says here, drone technology is changing by leaps and bounds and promises to be incredibly helpful to search and rescue teams in British Columbia. That's why Aerosmith Search and Rescue based in Qualicum Beach is celebrating a recent move by the BC government to allow SAR teams to use drones. It's kind of weird to think about, isn't it? Okay, we're gonna allow you to use drones now? I would think you should be using them if it's more practical in general. I even said myself, in many cases it feels like it should be like a essential hiking tool of sort when you're lost. There's been so many stories of people getting lost in areas where they don't know where they are. Can you imagine if you just flew a drone up in the air and say, oh, there's where I am, like that type of thing? It says it's proven to be a whole new way of searching. It's made our search and rescue missions three-dimensional with the ability to search from the sky anytime, day or night, and much lower to the treetops that we could previously do with rotary wing or fixed wing, said Aerosmith SAR President Nick Rivers. The province recently released new drone guidelines for SAR teams. So we recently got a new provincial operating guideline passed through Emergency Management Climate Readiness, which allows us to use drones, Rivers added. So this allows us to operate under Transport Canada guidelines. Aerosmith Search and Rescue leads the way in drone readiness among SAR teams on Vancouver Island and already owns a drone equipped with 4 cameras, thermal imaging, and an impressive array of software that shows up on the drone's handheld controller. It has a laser rangefinder on it. One of the things that gives us the ability to do is have exact distances to what we see. So if we do see our subject and they happen to be 300 to 500 meters away, we can tell exactly where that is. And of course, they mentioned here too is just another tool. They're not going to stop using, I guess, other stuff as well, which is necessary during search and rescues. But again, it makes you wonder whether or not this should be an essential tool of sorts just for an average person. Can you imagine all the times where ironically lives have probably been lost because people treat this stuff like some huge manned aircraft and make it so restrictive? That's kind of ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it? But I guess either way, it's good that people are going to be able to use this, even if it's just like officials at the moment anyways in these types of situations. You may think it's crazy, but there's a lot of people like that, where there's so many situations where average people could use a drone to save someone's life, and their first response, for example, would be, nope, it's illegal, etc., etc. I mean, that's crazy, but to me, it's not even about safety in those situations. It's just more about people wanting to maintain control of sort. Although in terms of bigger drones, still conflict around the world. How about this one? This one says, French Reaper drone was target of Russian intimidation, defense minister says. A French Reaper drone on a surveillance mission in international airspace over the eastern Mediterranean was the target of intimidation by a Russian Su-35 fighter jet, France's defense minister Sébastien Lecornu said on Tuesday. The incident comes as European countries scramble to boost defense spending and increase support for Ukraine in its war against invading Russian forces amid growing doubts over the commitment of the Trump administration to defending Europe. The Russian jet made 3 successive passes in close proximity, which, quote, could have caused the drone to lose control, reflecting a desire to restrict free air movement in common areas, the corner wrote on X, adding this was an intentional, unprofessional, and aggressive action that is not acceptable. France will continue to act to defend freedom of navigation in international air and maritime spaces. Well, still conflict around the world. It's kind of interesting to think about in this case too, because everyone always talks about they're worried about drones hitting like an aircraft of sort, whereas in these cases, it's the drone operators that are afraid of the aircrafts. And in terms of international conflict, I guess, is it official now in terms of these tariffs being imposed on Canada from the US and then vice versa? Canada putting tariffs on the US? This one says, Trump's trade war draws swift retaliation as Mexico, Canada, and China impose tariffs on the US. President Donald Trump launched a trade war Tuesday against America's 3 biggest trading partners, drawing immediate retaliation from Mexico, Canada, and China, and sending financial markets into a tailspin as the US faced a threat of a rekindled inflation and paralyzing uncertainty for businesses. Just after midnight, Trump imposed 25% taxes or tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports, though he limited the levy to 10% on Canadian energy. Trump also doubled the tariff he slapped last month on Chinese products to 20%. And with that thought too of that story yesterday where I mentioned how crowds here in Canada, they're booing when they hear the American national anthem, well, I guess the Prime Minister here is kind of, in a sense, encouraging people to keep doing it in general. Because first there was this post, for example, it was written here saying, the moment US tariffs came into effect this morning, so did the Canadian response. Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion of American products, starting with $30 billion worth of goods immediately and the remaining $125 billion in 21 days' time. And he continued to say a bunch of other stuff, with one point actually making rounds everywhere was how, remember that story I mentioned yesterday where it seemed like here when it comes to sporting events, the Canadian crowd has been booing the US national anthem? And he made a comment about that, and it seems like he's actually encouraging it in some ways. I was like, uh-oh, is this thing gonna continue still?
We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem.
So let's see what happens here. I know some people here, they're really terrified in terms of things, for example, such as inflation. I guess we'll see, huh? I know a lot of the stores actually, they have a lot of Canadian made signs now because there's some kind of movement of sort because of all this where people are trying to buy things, I guess, made in the country. All right, see you guys later.